From the same show that gave us Omni-Man turning superheroes into fine red mist, we now have scenes that feel like a PowerPoint presentation with sound effects. Invincible was never a visual masterpiece, even in Season 1. There were animation shortcuts, reused frames, and some stiff movements. But when it mattered, it delivered. The big fights had weight, impact, and fluidity, making every punch feel brutal. Now, in Season 3, things look rougher. Action scenes feel choppier, characters are weirdly stiff, and there are more moments where it looks like they just ran out of in-between frames. The budget has supposedly increased, but it sure doesn't feel like it. Season 1 was handled by multiple animation studios, including Wind Sun Sky and Maven Image Platform, and while it had its limits, it was consistent where it counted. Now, with Season 3 still under Wind Sun Sky but using more outsourced studios, it seems like something got lost in the process. So what's going on? Is it budget mismanagement, production crunch, or just a shift in priorities?
Let me break it down for you, Mark.
While Invincible has reportedly maintained a strong budget, averaging around $10 million per episode in Season 1, but more money doesn't always mean better animation. That budget covers a lot more than just the visuals, including voice actors like Steven Yeun, Sandra Oh, and J.K. Simmons, which takes up a significant portion of resources. On top of that, increased funding also goes toward marketing, production logistics, and expanding the overall scope of the series. If the animation budget itself hasn't scaled up at the same rate as other costs, that would explain why some scenes in Season 3 feel rushed or lower quality despite the show's continued success. Remember how we waited almost 3 years for Season 2? Fans were getting impatient, and Amazon knew they needed to speed things up. Now, we're getting episodes much faster, which sounds great.
We can come out at a fairly regular clip. I can't guarantee that we'll be coming back in early February every single year, but I can say that is the goal.
Until you realize how that impacts production. Animation takes time. Rushing it means cutting corners, less time for in-betweens, fewer unique frames, and sometimes entire sequences that feel half-finished. This isn't just an Invincible problem either. Anime fans see this all the time. Overworked animators, tight deadlines, and shows that end up looking way worse than they should. And while Western animation doesn't usually do Blu-ray fixes like anime does, we're still seeing Invincible suffer from that same problem. Less time, more pressure, and a product that doesn't look as polished as it should. If you want to see animation done right, just look at Jujutsu Kaisen. Fights like Gojo versus Toji or Yuji and Todo versus Hanami hit hard because they're fast, fluid, and full of weight. Meanwhile, Invincible Season 3 has moments where characters slide across the screen like PNGs in a PowerPoint presentation. Instead of dynamic, hard-hitting action, some fights feel stiff and choppy, losing the impact that made the earlier seasons stand out. Animation isn't just about raw frame count, it's about how those frames are used. Shows like Arcane and Spider-Verse don't have the highest frame rates in every scene, but they compensate with unique artistic direction, dynamic posing, and stylized motion. Every frame looks intentional. Meanwhile, Invincible sticks to a more traditional comic book aesthetic, which works great when the animation is fluid, but falls apart when things stiffen up. One of the biggest issues is how Invincible handles background art and shading. Many scenes rely on flat, static backdrops that make environments feel lifeless. There's minimal atmospheric lighting, and shadows are often just simple gradients instead of adding depth. Compare this to Arcane, where every shot has painterly textures, or Jujutsu Kaisen, where fights use cinematic lighting to enhance the action. Even a show like The Legend of Vox Machina finds ways to keep its more limited animation engaging by using strong key poses and dynamic effects. That's not to say Invincible needs to completely change its look, but small tweaks could go a long way. Leaning into heavier shadows, more contrast, or even just improving character expressions in tense moments could make even the more static shots feel intentional rather than unfinished. Right now, when the animation dips, it doesn't feel stylized, it just looks cheap. Outsourcing animation isn't inherently bad. In fact, most of your favorite animated shows, whether Western or anime, use outsourced studios to handle bulk work. But the key difference between a show that maintains quality and one that struggles is how well those outsourced teams are managed. And this is where Invincible seems to be having issues. Back in Season 1, Wind Sun Sky and Maven Image Platform were the primary studios handling animation, with other studios assisting. It wasn't perfect, but the key action moments still felt strong. Now Season 3 has even more outsourced teams working on different episodes, leading to noticeable inconsistencies in fight choreography, movement, and even basic character animation. One fight will have well-timed impacts and strong weight behind every punch, while another feels like it's missing half the frames needed to make movements fluid. You might get one episode that looks great, then another that suddenly feels stiff, as if corners were cut last minute. It's the same issue that happens with long-running anime when multiple studios are brought in for different episodes. But unlike anime, Invincible isn't being made week to week under a crunch schedule. It had time. The best way to avoid this issue is what shows like Arcane or Castlevania did. Stick with a single lead studio that maintains a consistent vision. Arcane was entirely produced by Fortiche, which meant every episode had the same level of quality. Even if Invincible can't match that, there needs to be better coordination between studios to avoid the jarring inconsistencies we're seeing now. Here's the real question. Was Invincible ever meant to be an animation powerhouse? The show's strengths have always been its writing, voice acting,
Why did you... what you did was not nice!
And how it subverts superhero tropes. Fans don't watch Invincible expecting Demon Slayer-level animation. They watch it for the brutal storytelling and the emotional weight behind the fights. The issue is that Invincible set a standard it now seems to be falling short of. Season 1's action, while not always smooth, felt intense. The Omni-Man vs. Guardians fight stands out because of how it was presented, the framing, movement, and impact of every hit. Season 3 feels rushed in comparison, lacking that same weight. Whether fans expected top-tier animation doesn't matter anymore. Invincible already proved it could deliver. Once a show sets a high bar, fans expect that level consistently. If Invincible wants to stay engaging, its visual storytelling needs to catch up with its writing and performances, because right now, the animation is lagging behind. Why does Invincible struggle so much with its animation when other action-heavy shows manage to pull it off? A big part of the answer comes down to manpower and budget. Reports suggest that Invincible operates with a budget of around $750,000 per episode, far lower than the $2.5 million figure some have speculated, and significantly less than shows like Arcane, which had a staggering $13.8 million per episode. On top of that, Invincible's animation team is much smaller compared to productions with similar action-heavy storytelling. With fewer resources and fewer artists, the show is forced to cut corners, leading to its stiff movement, inconsistent fight scenes, and static cinematography. Compared to the fluid animation of high-budget anime or even Western series like Castlevania, Invincible simply can't compete at the same level. Another issue worth mentioning is the show's inconsistent use of blood and gore. Invincible is known for its brutal violence, but the way it's animated can sometimes feel weightless or out of place. In some scenes, the gore is detailed and visceral, making the impact feel real. But in others, it looks like a layer of red paint smeared on top of the characters, lacking depth or interaction with the environment. Compare this to something like Castlevania, where blood splatters react to lighting, movement, and physical contact in a way that enhances the action. Invincible's gore is often excessive, but if it doesn't feel grounded in the scene, it loses some of its effectiveness. So, at the end of the day, Invincible's animation struggles come down to a small team, a limited budget, and production constraints that hold it back from reaching its full potential. The writing and storytelling might be strong, but the animation often feels like it's doing the bare minimum to keep up, especially in a genre built on dynamic, high-energy action. The fact that a superhero show with brutal fights and city-destroying battles struggles to match the fluidity of even mid-budget anime says a lot about where Western adult animation is at right now. And with Amazon's deep pockets, you'd think they could afford to give the animators more resources. But maybe they're too busy funding the 12th spin-off of The Walking Dead, because clearly that franchise still has plenty of life left in it. At this rate, Invincible might get a budget increase in time for Season 5, but by then, we'll probably have The Walking Dead, Grocery Store Chronicles taking up all the streaming money. Hopefully, Invincible gets the investment it deserves before it starts looking as lifeless as a walker itself. But what do you think? Will the animation ever improve, or is this just the reality of Western adult animation?